the US of A in a short while from now.
Bunch of substantive deals, particularly in defense technology, are going to be signed. The big one, of course, being the GE jet engine deal for the 414 GE jet engines, which are going to be manufactured in India.
जब देश की प्रेजेंस यहाँ पे फील होती है तो बहुत गर्व लगता है कि मेरा देश का मैं हिस्सा हूँ।
इंडिया का लीडर जो होता है वो ऐसा होना चाहिए जो इंडिया को प्यार करता है।
Plenty of aspects on the agenda, plenty of items. What's going to be priority? We'll talk about that because the stage is set for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's much-awaited and anticipated trip to the United States. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first state visit to the US, and he is expected to land at the Andrews Air Force Base in Washington at 10:30 p.m. later tonight. PM Modi is scheduled to meet top CEOs and noted American citizens before leading the celebration marking the International Yoga Day at the UN headquarters on Wednesday. From a private dinner with the Bidens to a diaspora event, from addressing US congressmen to bilaterals, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has a host of events lined up. Prior to his departure to the US, in an interview with the US-based newspaper, The Wall Street Journal, PM Narendra Modi said, and these are some of the quotes from that interview that we're putting out here, that the relationship between leaders of the US and India is one of unprecedented trust. PM Modi touched upon a host of issues. Speaking about India, PM Modi said that he is the first Prime Minister to be born in free India, and that is why his thought process, his conduct and what he does is inspired and influenced by India's traditions. He goes on to say in that interview that he deserves or derives his strength from India's attributes. He presents India to the world as it is and as he is. Speaking on the ties with the US, Prime Minister said that there is an unprecedented trust between the leaders of both US and India. PM said that India deserves a much higher, deeper and wider profile and of course a greater role on the global stage. Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized that India is gaining its rightful position in the world. Nearly 75 years after its independence, Prime Minister said and told Wall Street Journal that we do not see India as supplanting any nation, but only adding value to nations and to the world at large. PM also batting for diversification in supply chain, so going beyond just depending upon one or two supply chain options and perhaps making the world a multilateral fora. Speaking about India's demand on the UNSCA expansion, that means the UN Security Council expansion, Prime Minister said that there has to be an evaluation of the current membership of the UN Security Council. He also said that the world should be asked if it wants India to be there or not. Speaking on the Russia-Ukraine issue, PM said that India supports all genuine efforts to end conflict. He also said that India will do whatever it can to ensure enduring peace and stability. Now, further speaking on the Russia-Ukraine war or the conflict, PM Narendra Modi said that all countries should respect international law. PM clearing India's stand said some people say that we are neutral, but India is not neutral. India is on the side of peace. PM said the world has full confidence that India's topmost priority is peace. PM reiterated that resolve disputes with diplomacy and dialogue, not war or conflicts. Prime Minister also sending a stern message across to China. PM said that normal bilateral ties with China, peace and tranquility in the border areas is essential. In a direct message to China, PM said that we have a core belief in respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity, observing the rule of law and peaceful resolution of differences and disputes. PM also underlined India is fully prepared and committed to protect its sovereignty and dignity. Now, Let's give you a background of how India-US ties have grown over the past many decades. China remains a common challenger for both India and US. The recent fortification of equations between India and the US is also because of the China factor. For US, India is a pivotal partner against Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. For India, US is the most important ally against China's expansionist strategy. The US sees India as a geopolitical counterbalancing for the China threat. For India, it is to also rise as an Asian giant, not just an alternate to China, but of course an alternate to the world as a manufacturing hub, as a supply chain option. Defense cooperation or cooperation remains a win-win situation for both nations. For America, India turns out to be a big defense market. For India, it is important as it will reduce its dependence not just on Russian arms but also our entire import bill. We want to make in India, and technology transfer is a key issue, key aspect towards making in India and India becoming a defense exporter rather than an importer. US President Joe Biden on most occasions has had and maintained a pro-India stance since the 90s. Here's why. Back in 1998, when India conducted its nuclear tests, then Senator Joe Biden recognized the significance and stature of India as a nation and emphasized that it could not be isolated forever. He was a senator then. In 2001, as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Joe Biden penned a letter to then President George W. Bush urging his administration to lift sanctions imposed on India, arguing that if the sanctions are removed, India will respond with reciprocal acts of goodwill in non-proliferation and other arenas. In 2006, Joe Biden said that he knew that by 2020, India and the US will be two closest nations. In 2008, Joe Biden played a significant role in the US Senate's approval of the historic nuclear deal with India in 2008. Upon approval, Joe Biden said it's more than just a nuke deal, it's a positive departure in Indo-US equations. He was a senator then. 2013, speaking at the Bombay Stock Exchange, Joe Biden emphasized the importance of expanding economic ties between the two countries and said that India can enhance economic influence around the world and in the process, lift the whole world. He was US Vice President at that time. 2015, Vice President Joe Biden advocated for stronger counter-terrorism cooperation between the two nations. In 2020, as President, Joe Biden objected to Donald Trump when he referred to Air India as filthy. But as India and China inch closer, China is also feeling the jitters. India taking leaps as far as deals on Predator drones, GE F-414 engines, which are on the cards. China obviously jittery, saying India's trade with the US can't replace the trade with China because China absorbs nearly $3 trillion of US debt. India also moving forward as Prime Minister Narendra Modi calling for diversification in supply chains. China in the meanwhile saying very clearly that China cannot be replaced. India cannot replace China on the global supply chain aspect is concerned. India is not seeking to replace China but giving nations another option. Indo-US eyeing cooperation in defense and of course telecom. Resolve issues, do not target China, don't make it an objective to target us. PM Modi asserting the commitment to protect sovereignty. China says India must abandon geopolitical calculations. Second Indian Prime Minister to be invited for the official state visit. China says India must not join the US. It's reckless and a selfish game. These are the aspects that stand out. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go across to our guests one by one. Dr. Bharat Barai, US-India Community Foundation member, is with us. Arun Kumar Singh, former India ambassador to the US, is with us. And we also have, and he's also a distinguished international fellow, Center for the Advanced Study of India. Rick Rosso is also there with us. He's the director of the chair, US-India Policy Studies, CSIS. Michael Kugelman, director, South Asia Institute, Wilson Center, is also with us. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Greetings. And let's hope this visit brings further good tidings. I'm going to start with Bharat Barai ji. Dr. Bharat Barai, you've had a hectic and very tension-filled last 2 or 3 months. It was all aimed at a big diaspora event in Chicago. Finally, you've got the Reagan Center, last-minute confirmations, 1,000 seating capacity, and there will be nearly 100,000 people vying for those 1,000 seats. So take us through what's planned and how important is PM Modi's visit this time around. Dr. Barai.
PM Modi is a people's prime minister. He has kept very good relationship with the diaspora all over the world, including United States. We had the honor and the opportunity and privilege of hosting at Madison Square Garden, which launched his international recognition. And if I caught President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry, Mr. Prime Minister, we cannot match the rock star reception that you received at Madison Square Garden. Ever since then, there is a bonhomie between the Prime Minister and the diaspora, whether it is in Australia, whether it is in England, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in France, whether it's in Denmark, whether it's in Germany, and of course in the United States. The diaspora has been working very actively for India, and saying that the Prime Minister is very actively working for India to try to make India a much better country. He wants to take it to the level of a developed country, and in every sphere he is working tirelessly, and we as diaspora want to join him in whatever way we can do to help the living standard of India people.
What is the biggest expectation, Dr. Barai, before I bring in Arunji and the rest of the other guests? Quick question with you, sir. What is your biggest expectation as representing the Indian diaspora in the US?
We have asked the Prime Minister the topic of his talk to us, the role of diaspora in the growth story of India. So he can advise us, he can guide us, what can the diaspora do for India? I mean, lots of people are doing many good things to try to elevate the status of India, and the diaspora has been active both financially. As you know, the diaspora contribute or they remit almost $100 billion to India every year from different parts of the world. In addition, as far as the US diaspora is concerned, they actively educate the congressmen and senators, and when it comes to bills, either it is anti-India bills, some people try to play mischief in US Congress also, and that's the time the diaspora work very actively. And if you remember in 2008, when the nuclear treaty was brought before the US Congress, it was called Dead on Arrival. It had only support of 200 Republican members or little less than that, and no Democratic support.
Right.
Same way in US Senate. And it was diaspora that made it possible. And it was Prime Minister then Manmohan Singh who said, if it was not for Indian diaspora, the nuclear treaty bill would not have passed the US Congress. So diaspora works in many ways, and a lot of it is working with the congressmen and senators. And I give credit to all our Indian Americans all over the USA.
Dr. Barai, please stay on with us. Arunji, thank you very much. Ambassador, if I may ask you, for you, what is the biggest highlight or perhaps the biggest box that you would want ticked by the time Prime Minister Narendra Modi takes off from the US of A towards Egypt?
We would hope that some of the decisions that are being anticipated, for example, decision related to the GE jet engine, decision related to semiconductors, some additional decisions related to cooperation in critical and emerging technologies, some decisions related to future path for defense cooperation. If clear decisions and paths forward are identified and announced for those, I think that will be certainly a major achievement. Of course, before that, the visit in itself is a significant achievement. You've referred to the interview that the Prime Minister gave to Wall Street Journal, where he spoke about India playing a greater role in global affairs, commensurate with its size and weight. And I think this visit will certainly contribute to that process. The fact that the US has decided to make it an official state visit. This is only the third state visitor of the Biden administration. And also that the US Congress has decided to invite the Prime Minister to address a joint session for the second time. And very few global leaders have been given this kind of an opportunity to address a joint session of Congress twice. And reflecting the broad bipartisan support in the US political system and in Congress among Republicans and Democrats for the India relationship. So I think clear decisions to advance specific areas of cooperation, clear recognition that US recognizes that India will play a greater role in global affairs and is supportive of that role, I think those would be key decisions and important outcomes from the visit.
But managing equations with America for India is not going to be easy. Are we going to tilt away from Russia? So far, that kind of alignment, Arun Singh ji, has not been easy because America will expect a lot in return. It's not easy to be friends of America. That's what many people believe. Many experts say that you'd rather be an enemy of America than be its friend. There's a very geopolitical view that says that. Where do you stand?
Well, sure. Some experts say one thing and some experts say exactly the other.
Gee.
So recently there was an article which said that India was a bad bet for the US. And there was another article which said that India was the best bet for the US. So there are views and views. But clearly, I think if you look at the current global situation, there is an intense geopolitical competition going on between US, Russia, and China. And what India needs to do, keeping in mind its own interests and its comprehensive national interests, is to build further the relationship with the United States, sustain the relationship with Russia, and strengthen itself to deal with the challenge from China. And in this process, US will be an important partner. And it's not a question of tilting towards one or the other. It's a question of building partnerships where you strengthen yourself. And most countries in international relations do not do relationship based on either or. Countries that have a relationship with India don't say that they are not going to have a relationship with Pakistan. They have it each, depending on how their national interest plays out. And similarly, US has a difficult relationship with China, but still wants to maintain some discussion, dialogue going on with China. So I think if we are consolidating the relationship with the US, because it is our largest trading partner, largest investment partner, largest single country presence of Indian origin diaspora, a country that is supportive of India's rise. And US has said that they see the rise of India to be in US interest. They see India as a net security provider in the region. They are ready to provide and partner with India at higher levels of technology. That's an opportunity we must seize. But that doesn't mean that we are tilting away or tilting towards it.
Right.
I think India is taking actions and decisions that will be of use to India from its own national interest point of view.
But that's where the biggest challenge is, isn't it, Rick? Because America will always see it from its own interests, about safeguarding American interests. India is looking at trying to further its interests. Now, will they converge, or will that always be a point of divergence?
Well, that's where regular meetings are important. The divergences are pretty obvious. I think if we have differing approaches in how we engage other countries in South Asia, which most of India's neighborhood has had a difficult time towing the line on democracy and balancing relationship with other nations. So we need to make sure that how the United States engages India's neighbors comports well with India's own strategy there. Getting that wrong could be really dangerous for the U.S.-India relationship. How we engage things, Russia invasion of Ukraine. Obviously, we're dancing a very delicate dance on this one as well. We think the upside of the relationship, when we look at China, when we look at commercial engagement and such, is big enough where we're not going to sever the relationship over differing views on Russia, Ukraine. But that's today, that's this administration, this leadership. There's going to be things like this popping up all the time because we don't have a shared overview in a lot of issues on global affairs. But we do have shared overview on the big ones, on the threat that China poses for regional instability, the threat that climate change poses for global challenges, the need to move people, the need to move money between trade and investment. These areas, there's a lot of overlap, and it's more than enough to build a very important and powerful agenda, but also to make sure that we don't blow up the relationship over areas where we have differences.
Two aspects, Rick, on the UN Security Council expansion and, doing away with the veto powers that is enjoyed by 5 nations. Now, India has a very strong position there. But before we get into the UNSC, pivoting away from China, how easy or difficult is it going to be for the US itself? Because China buys into a huge amount of the US debt. And that's what China wields as a clout over any US aggression or move against Chinese interests.
Well, I think, you've had successive American presidents, including President Trump, in a very kind of rare speech talking about foreign policy, but conveying to the American public that peeling away from China is in our national interest, and it's going to cause some pain. It's going to cause some economic hardship. The low cost, the relative low inflation that we've had in consumer products over the last couple of decades, is largely driven by the fact that China was the low cost manufacturer. Now, other countries, even before the drawback, even before the trade fight with China, even before COVID, had already started looking for other destinations. I don't think India was necessarily first on that list. You saw a lot of companies rushing to Mexico, Vietnam, Malaysia, but India stands well. And part of that is not, of course, the agenda that Modi himself is going to undertake, but what are state governments doing in India to improve the ease of doing business and improve the business environment? If those things get right, then that really will add another important leg to the relationship. I mean, India is already our 8th largest goods trading partner, and quite a bit higher if you count services on top of that. The United States is India's largest trade partner, so the economic relationship already is fairly robust and healthy. But when we look at the big ones in the U.S. view, the big three, of course, our trade relationship with China, with Mexico and Canada, India still has some distance to the frontier. But I think we can get there. It's going to involve a lot of reforms, a lot of process issues in India. But our companies enjoy working together. Our people like moving back and forth. So that's a great bedrock to build this really powerful and dynamic trade relationship on.
Can this become bipartisan, the point of view with vis-a-vis India, Michael? Or will there always be a divergence there too across the alley?
No, I think one of the big success stories for U.S.-India relations over the last few years is that there is very strong bipartisan, multi-partisan support for the partnership. And of course, I would think it's the same in India. And indeed, I mean, certainly we've heard criticism from a number of what I would describe as progressive Democrats on Capitol Hill, particularly in terms of rights and democracy issues. But that does not suggest that these individuals oppose the idea of a deeper U.S.-India partnership. And in fact, I can remember when India experienced that terrible COVID surge back in 2021, some of these very U.S. members of Congress that had been critical of India on other issues were some of the first to issue statements of solidarity and support. So no, I think that that's a big success story for this. There are a lot of success stories for the relationship over the last few years, but I think the fact that you have very strong support on both sides of the political aisle for moving things forward is important. And looking at what happened during the Trump era, there was a lot of major changes to U.S. foreign policy, and unfortunately, many of America's top partnerships experienced stress, including America's relations with NATO allies in East Asia. But the relationship with India, even though there were some tensions for sure, particularly over trade, it remained in a strong place. And again, that's because you had a Republican administration that was keen to move things forward, even a Republican administration led by a maverick president in President Trump. So my point is that, no, I really don't see partisanship as something that's going to cause a major challenge for the relationship at all. I think there's really very sound bipartisan, multi-partisan support for the idea of moving the partnership forward.
India is pushing for technology transfer in defense. The jet engines transfer is a big issue. And support as far as UN reforms is concerned. Will America be inclined? Michael?
Well, I mean, on the UN issue, and we've heard President Obama, of course, very famously, when he was in India, as I recall, during one of his visits, calling for India to receive he said that he supported the idea of India becoming a permanent member of the UN Security Council, which suggested, at least even if indirectly, support for the idea of reforms within the UN to make it possible for the likes of India to become a permanent member. But I think on the issue of tech, that's more clear-cut. This, in my view, has become one of the newest big areas of cooperation for the U.S.-India relationship. Looking at ISET, which I think is so significant in that you finally have this opportunity to push beyond the bureaucracy that has really held back a lot of the potential cooperation on tech issues. The fact that the national security advisors in both countries are overseeing this major new initiative on critical and emerging technologies, I think that suggests the degree of purpose and determination within both governments to move things forward on the tech front. And the fact that if this GE deal does indeed go forward, and if it's announced, you're looking at something that really hasn't happened before, a level of tech transfer that hasn't happened in the past. Still a lot to talk about. The export control control issue is still something that has to be addressed. But I do see tech as a major, one of the key areas of growth in the relationship. A lot of potential for more cooperation there.
Because India's growth story is largely services and software driven, and if it's got to be comprehensive, then we've got to become a manufacturing hub too, and it's got to become a lot of the hardware produced also. But Ambassador Singh, if I may ask you, the story is also about narratives and security. There are elements who are operating against India's sovereignty, operating out of US soil. Now, America can go anywhere around the world and take out anybody who's an enemy to American interests. And President Biden can say that out loud, that we will find you and we will take you down. But can we do that? Will America cooperate with us to allow us to take down those who are acting against our sovereignty? Is that going to be an issue?
I don't think it's a major issue. I mean, from what I understand, there's been very good cooperation from the US in dealing with people who are acting against India's interests and against India's sovereignty. And over the years, that relationship has consolidated significantly. For example, if you look at the 26/11 attack that took place in Mumbai, and in unraveling issues related to that attack, the sources of that attack, intelligence related to that attack, the US had been a very, very important partner. And then again, some of the challenges we face from people based in the Gulf. And again, US has been very, very cooperative in working with countries in the region to address some of the challenges that India has faced. So, there could be sometimes differences of interpretation related to application of certain laws. But by and large, over the years, it's not like what you see the challenge in Canada.
Right.
But in the US, there has been a responsiveness to addressing India's concerns.
We should have Zaka Jacob joining us anytime. So final question to Dr. Barai. The SB 403 issue, Dr. Barai, are you going to ask the Prime Minister to have a look at it?
I don't know that I would like to get involved in that part at this time. That's the honest answer.
But we'd see if that issue is brought up with the Prime Minister at some forum, because there are many within the Indian diaspora who are concerned with this SB 403 law. But we'll keep that in abeyance for further discussions through the course of the next 3-4 days. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your time. Much appreciate. A very, very engaging conversation. Let's quickly go across to Zaka. Zaka, you're up and about on the move. So nighttime in India is daytime in the US. Daytime in the US, nighttime in the US is, and vice versa. So you're going to be working round the clock. So whereabouts are you?
So I was thinking coming here would be a bit like a holiday, but it's not, especially when you're covering Prime Minister Modi. It's 24/7, it's round the clock. I'm here outside the Lotte Hotel. It's the Lotte New York Palace. That's where the official Indian delegation will be staying. In about a couple of hours from now, it's about 11 o'clock local time here in New York. At about 1 o'clock in the afternoon is when Prime Minister is expected to land at the JFK airport. There will be a small welcome ceremony there at the JFK airport, and the bigger one is going to be outside the Lotte Hotel here, where we're expecting over 1,000 folks from the Indian American community, the Friends of India, who are all going to be landing up here around the time when Prime Minister Modi comes here. So that's going to be sort of in the middle of the night for you folks, so you can touch base once again when there is more people. But just to give you an outline of why this visit is the most important one that Prime Minister has undertaken to the US. Remember, he's had 6 visits to the US since he became Prime Minister in 2014, but this is the first ever state visit. That is the highest level diplomatic visit that can be extended by any US administration to a visiting head of government or state. So this is the first time that Prime Minister Modi will be getting a state visit. Now, a large part of it is symbolism. You have the state banquet, you have the 21-gun salute, the military bands will be playing. That's going to be on Thursday morning at the White House. Here in New York, of course, after he lands up today, he will be meeting an eclectic group of people, CEOs, Nobel laureates, thinkers, folks from the film world and so on. So those meetings are going to happen from 4 o'clock local time till about 7:38. And then tomorrow morning, the big event here in New York is just a little further from here on the east side, overlooking the beautiful East River. At the UN headquarters, in the north lawns of the UN headquarters, Prime Minister Modi will be leading the International Yoga Day celebrations. That's going to be tomorrow morning local time, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. He'll be joined by the UN Secretary General. He'll be joined by the rotating president of the UNGA currently. There'll be a lot of celebrities joining him as well. And we're given to understand by Indian officials, over 100 people from different walks of life will be joining Prime Minister Modi at the North Lawns of the UN headquarters. So that's going to be the Yoga Day celebrations tomorrow morning, after which he heads out.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, are you stretching your limbs? Which asana are you going to practice? But more importantly, between the two leaders, what is the one big issue they're going to be meditating on? One big issue.
I think, look, because it's coming just a couple of months before the G20 meeting, and India is the host of the G20, I think a lot of the conversation will revolve around that. And as you well know, Anand, last time around in Bali, when Indonesia was the host of the G20, it took them days to finally thrash out a draft agreement because the Russia-Ukraine war, they couldn't agree on a common terminology, and finally they did. There were 2 paragraphs. India played a very important role in drafting those 2 paragraphs. This time again, a lot of the conversation is going to be twofold. One, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war and its fallout. Of course, India has taken as the Prime Minister said, we've chosen the side of peace in this war. The other big sort of shadow on this visit, as it were, would be China. I think that's going to be the dragon in the room. Just now, you've seen Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, conclude a visit to China. He's flying straight back and will be straight joining the delegation level talks in Washington. That's going to happen on Thursday. So there is going to be a lot of said and unsaid things about China. So I think these are the 2 dominant themes because of the topicality around this visit and the time in which it's coming. The Russia-Ukraine war and its fallout, and of course, how to deal with a growingly aggressive China.
Where you don't have time to get over jet lag, and you're not going to have time to feel it either, or miss it either. So all the best to you over the next 72 hours, Akka. We're going to see a lot of you on air. Thanks a lot.
All right. There's a little trick to beating jet lag. One of my friends said this when I boarded the flight. He said, "Don't sleep on your first flight. You'll be okay by the time you hit New York." So I think that's the trick to follow. Just imagine while you're already on the plane that you're living on New York time and not India time.
Well, I hope you've been able to cheat yourself, because we're going to see a lot of you, and we're going to keep calling you to come shoulder this entire coverage that we're going to lead here on CNN News 18. Great work. Good speaking with you, Zaka. Have a good day. Thanks a lot.